My name is Will Penfield. On behalf of Everbridge, I'm excited to present this webinar, Connecting Emergency Alerting and Notifications with Federal Signal and Everbridge. In this webinar, our presenters will cover how the Internet of Things relates to critical communications, when to include Internet-enabled devices as part of crisis communication planning, and new use cases for smart warning devices you may have already deployed. After the presentation, we will have a 15-minute Q&A session with our speakers. As a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time during the webinar. You may send your questions by typing in the open text field in the questions panel and sending your question to all panelists. If time runs out before your question is asked, we will try to follow up with you after the webinar. Links to the recording of the webinar and slides from today's presentation will be available on our blog within a few days of today's session. You can also look for a link to recordings for all of our webinars on everbridge.com under our resources section. If you're on Twitter, we encourage you to take a moment to follow us at Everbridge and follow Federal Signal at FedSigEMCom. Use the webinar hashtags Sirens, Everbridge, FedSig, Federal Warning, and IoT to share snippets of insight throughout our program with your followers. We'll even retweet some of your comments. And now, I would like to introduce you to our speakers. From Federal Signal, we have Nirmal Chutkar. Nirmal is the Director of Professional Services at Federal Signal Corporation. He is a technology professional with rich operations and business strategy expertise in the B2B sector. He has led key initiatives at Federal Signal in building a profitable client delivery practice while diversifying their solution offerings. Before joining Federal Signal, Chutkar worked at Motorola Solutions in designing mission-critical communication systems for government agencies. He also co-founded a nonprofit angel investor network in India. From Everbridge, we have Imad Moulin. Imad is the Chief Technology Officer for Everbridge. In this role, Moulin is responsible for Everbridge's market strategy, product roadmap, innovation, and research and development. Moulin joined Everbridge in 2011 when the company acquired Cloud4, an enterprise cloud management company where he was co-founder and CTO. Prior to Cloud4, Moulin served as CTO of CompuWare's Application Performance Management Solutions division, which was formed when the company acquired Gomez, a provider of web performance management solutions where Moulin was CTO. Before this, he served as CTO of S1 Corporation, a provider of financial services solutions. And now I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter, Imad. You may begin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Nirmal, for being on this webinar with us. So today we're going to start by talking a little bit about IoT, the Internet of Things, and just, trust me, it'll all become relevant as to what this has to do with Federal Signal and Everbridge coming together as part of this integration. The Internet of Things, or IoT, but all kinds of devices being connected to the Internet and interacting with us on a daily basis. Gartner even forecasts that there will be 25 billion such devices connected to the Internet. You'll probably see other surveys that take that number up to 50 billion or 55 billion. Suffice it to say, the idea is that there will be lots and lots of tiny devices that are all connected, talking to us, talking to each other, and many of them are there today. So the idea is, of course, everything is connected, or everything will be connected. Whether it's your thermostat at home, it can be controlled from your smartphone, or it can actually learn about your habits and turn the temperature up or down, or whether it's your car that can notify you when it needs an oil change, or ultimately your fridge, supposedly, letting you know that you're out of milk. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're not going to focus on the consumer side of things and about your fridge, as interesting as it may be. Everything is connected, but the world of IoT is much more than thermostats and smart fridges and smart cars. Where we'll have the most impact is when we're dealing with our buildings and our businesses and our organizations and our public spaces. This is what we're going to focus on today. Everything is connected, but it'll have a much more profound and impactful outcome on our day-to-day lives, because it'll impact everything surrounding us in our daily lives, including how we work and how we stay safe. So ultimately, to go back to the main topic of our discussions, what does IoT have to do with critical communications? Well, it turns out a lot. And I'm actually going to walk you through in a few slides real-world use cases that are in production or have been in production for quite a while today that hopefully will give you an insight about how devices, big and small, require not just connectivity, but top-notch critical communications capability and logic in order to fully function. So let's start with critical communication where it's always been needed, critical communication for people. Some of you who've dealt with us in the past or are dealing with us right now certainly understand that we're always talking about connecting people and communicating with people as individuals, not as devices. Ultimately, you may need to reach somebody by trying a person across multiple devices until you can get some type of acknowledgement or confirmation and ensure that that person has received the appropriate message. And that person can be part of a team of 10 or 1,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000. So whether you're calling on a small team to come fix an issue or evacuating an entire city or county, the critical aspect of this communication is important. You need to reach and ensure and guarantee that you have indeed reached that person, regardless of the size that you are targeting. But ultimately, why is it that particular person that you need? Is there a particular event that requires that person's attention? Well, and who's the right person in this particular case that needs to deal with a particular event or incident or issue? Are you sure you have the right person? Is it because they have the right skill sets? Is it because they happen to be on duty right now? Is it because they happen to be on call and they are the ones who can respond to a particular event? You'll probably see where I'm going with this whole IoT thing now, right? Is it because of where they are located or a particular asset is located and they happen to be the closest person? What are you going to tell that person about the situation? Are you sure you're conveying all the proper information? And ultimately, how are you going to get to them? You need all of this information in order to ensure that as quickly as possible, if there is a particular situation or event, that you are reaching the right people at the right time and ensuring that you're reducing any mean time to know and then to resolve any particular incident that might be happening out there. So that's really the critical communication that has to do with the people side of things. But of course, you may have to have critical communication for devices, whether you're dealing with loudspeakers or public announcement systems or huge sirens that let people know that there's a tornado coming, or beacons that can let them know visually what the particular situation is. All of those devices need to also be activated, deactivated, updated appropriately. You'll need to know what the status is of each one of those. And the challenge that many of you have that do have to communicate with both people and devices from an activation perspective is how can you manage the outreach to people, to devices from a single console? Can I do that as part of the same process? Can I do that as part of the same template? Can I see all the reporting about what's going on in the same place? Can I see everything in a single map if I'm doing map-based communications? And why is this important anyway? Doesn't the multimodal approach simply work? Well, let's go back and talk about what can happen out there in the real world. Is our communication infrastructure reliable? Well, mostly we can say yes. on a day-to-day basis. If I pick up the phone and try to call somebody, I can get through to them. But what happens in situations that are not necessarily normal, a time of crisis? Well, we certainly heard about cell phone service not being exactly optimal during Hurricane Sandy, or certainly in the events following the Boston Marathon bombings. Wait a minute, I also see that landlines had issues during Hurricane Sandy. So which is it? Landlines or cell phones, or both? Well, it turns out it depends on the area. And in some cases, you lost both. So what's the most reliable way of getting to people if I'm losing cell phone coverage and losing landlines? I mean, the internet, email? Well, of course, those of you who have talked to us before and have heard many of our webinars before will probably have seen this slide. And we're always going to say the exact same thing over and over again, that in a global, dynamic world, there is no single path or delivery method or communications method that's ever going to be 100% reliable 100% of the time. That simply doesn't exist, especially in times of crisis. In some cases, things might be working just fine, and then a particular piece of communication infrastructure might become unreliable because it's overwhelmed, or because power is lost, or cell phone towers get knocked down. Ultimately, there is no such thing as a 100% reliable method 100% of the time. So, and again, those of you who've seen this type of slide before will notice that for now, part of what we've done is also added a few more modalities. Because the idea, of course, is that the only way to increase delivery and response success is to go to a multimodal messaging approach. The more ways you have of reaching that person, and again, you're targeting a person, not a device, the higher the likelihood of being able to get to them. And in some cases, if you do lose cell phone coverage and landline, etc., can you actually reach people in other ways? Via a PA system, a siren, a radio, right? Many of you that I've seen during conferences, etc., sometimes challenge me and says, you know, what's the worst case scenario? What if there is no internet and landlines are knocked down and there is no Twitter and there are no cell phone towers? What then? So jokingly, I say there's always carrier pigeons in a multimodal world. But again, you know, there are approaches that are somewhere in the middle. What if you could seamlessly integrate digital signage, big sirens, other ways of getting to people in addition to the usual multimodal capabilities that access and target devices that people are carrying? So for us at Everbridge, it's all part of the connectivity to the Internet of Things. And it really goes into two big buckets. Regardless of what or device you're dealing with, or where it happens to be, or what network it's on, or what people it's associated with, ultimately, it's about a device or a set of devices alerting and making sure that people know what's going on so that people can take action. And as I said, I will go back and share with you 4 specific scenarios that are in production today, actually in multiple locations, that illustrate just how diverse these types of devices are. So a sensor tells you something is wrong, and ultimately there is a communication plan that needs to be activated. But it could also be the other way around, that part of that communication plan requires that not only that people be notified, but that devices be activated, that machines be notified and activated. And that's the notion of the Internet of Things at Everbridge. So let's go to some of the real-world scenarios that illustrate just how diverse these types of devices are. So in some cases, today, and this has been going on for a few years, we have clients that use Everbridge and the ability to have streamlined communications with all the auditing capabilities, all the assured delivery, in such a way that when a particular implantable device, think of a pacemaker or another device that can track the vital signs, including in some cases respiration, etc., of a human being. But when a particular threshold is reached, whether it's erratic heartbeats or erratic respiration, that it sends a signal, sometimes using radio frequency or other types of communications to a base station that might be in the home or at work, and then that base station relays a signal saying help to an application that then, based on the data that is sent, makes a decision as to the severity of the situation. And that can then trigger, through Everbridge, a series of communications to the appropriate people. So whether it's going back to the clinic or the appropriate hospitalists or the primary care people, that says, here's the information that we're seeing. And then the appropriate logic can take place. How serious is this? Right? Should we actually wake people at home? Should we go and figure out who's on call today and let them know that they need to go back and reach out to the person? So think of a tiny implantable device that you can barely notice, but that's always connected with the outside world, that ultimately can send out just enough information so that a full-blown communication plan can be executed and automated. But what if it's not a human being that we're monitoring? What if we're monitoring critical infrastructure that runs a company's overall business? So in a particular case here, we're dealing with temperature sensors. Temperature sensors that ensure that if a particular server room gets too hot, that again, the same thing happens. You know, where's the sensor? Which room? Which business functions are going to be impacted if this temperature reaches the next level? And then Everbridge makes a decision because we get the little signal that says temperature sensor has been activated. We make a decision. Okay, based on the room where this was activated, based on the time of day, based on the temperature reading and the differential between what it was before and what it is now, who should we call? How severe is the situation? Who are the stakeholders that need to know that there may be an issue that could ultimately be production impacting? Who are the people that we're going to send a notification to so they can come and fix it? What if they don't respond in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes? What's the escalation policy going to be? And all of that can be executed simply by having the sensor send out an alert to Everbridge. One of my favorite use cases, because I've seen this now implemented in multiple at multiple sites, multiple clients, sometimes a little bit differently, is one that doesn't involve any critical communication, certainly not right away, but it involves people. It's the ability to understand and keep track of where people are. So in situations where you may have an organization that has a lot of hoteling capabilities, where you have a lot more people than you have physical spaces, or you have employees that travel quite a bit and that are required to badge in. So part of what we've seen is integrations with the Everbridge suite, where every time an employee badges in, the only thing that happens is that an API call is made so that that employee's location is updated in their profile. Oh, here's one more location we have. It's not just where they usually work or where they usually live, but it's also where have we last seen them because they've badged in. Are we communicating with the employee at this time? Absolutely not. All we know is we have a pretty good sense where they last worked. So they may be an employee that never works in this particular building, or they're coming in from a different office. The reason for this is ultimately when you want to communicate with them, what can you do? Well, you can simply go to your map or your list-based communication and say, I want to communicate with not just the people who typically work here and are assigned to this building, but the ones who have last badged in here. Easy enough, single API call that can be made, and again, integrations that we have with some of our partners today. And then going from tiny, tiny, tiny devices that are implantable to slightly larger devices, What happens if you have sensors that can monitor, for example, the water level in a dam? So when it reaches a certain level, why not have a communication that goes out to the Department of Public Works automatically and lets them know, here is the reading that we're seeing. And then again, based on that reading, it can make a determination as to how the escalation policy needs to be activated and how aggressive an escalation policy is. So maybe at a particular level, okay, it's fine if somebody doesn't respond within 15 minutes. But if it gets very aggressive, no, I need somebody who basically acknowledges that they've got the situation in their hand right now, and I'm going to give them 2 minutes to respond, otherwise I'm going to move on to the next person and escalate it potentially to their supervisor and so on and so forth. All of that via a single sensor reading that comes in. But the idea here is it's not just information that's coming in that's activating a plan. We need the communication to go to devices and from devices. What if you could have a way to activate an entire Everbridge template, whether it's a full-blown incident or a mass notification template, simply by pressing on a big red button that says emergency. But at the same time, you can control any of your other devices. So it's not just making phones ring or sending out emails or texts, but also making sure that your audible devices that happen to be indoors or your outdoor warning sirens are all activated in just the appropriate areas. And that can be done from a user interface that is Everbridge powered or from a physical device that has a big red button that says push in case of emergency. Well, all of that can be done and done fairly easily. All of that is also integrated within the Everbridge suite. So think about all of those devices being set up as contact, a special kind of contact within your Everbridge setup, and appearing on the map so that you can designate special kinds of devices such as signs, loudspeakers, visual signs, etc., that can be reached through the exact same way that you're using Everbridge today by selecting contact either on a list or using a rule or by drawing a nice big shape on a map. And ultimately, as soon as they're activated, getting that information back telling us that, yep, those devices have been activating and the people in that area have also been notified. And that, of course, includes digital signs that are usually not as snarky as the one that we have over here. So I'm going to turn it over to Nirmal right now to give you a little bit more insight on the different types of capabilities that the Federal Signal devices have and how they can be leveraged with this integration.
Sure. Thank you, Imad, and thanks all. So, warning systems and alarm devices. Just to put it to perspective, on your left side, the outside you see high-powered speaker arrays, sirens. And on the inside, there are multiple ways through a hardware-driven technology. It could be informer, it could be a public address system, intercom, loudspeakers for strobe lights for visual notification. So let's talk about sirens. It is not a new concept. They've been used for more than a century, historically, to warn civilian population during times of the war. And today, still many communities rely on sirens. But again, let's ask this. Is it necessary? Siren technology necessary? Yes. Is it sufficient these days? Probably not. Perhaps main two reasons I would think of. One, as Imad mentioned, multimodal messaging is the key to increase delivery and response success. And secondly, these sirens are very reliable and technology is reliable, but again, limitations on how much specific or detailed information can be conveyed. So as technology needs have evolved, Federal Signal has designed innovative solutions. So there are endless applications with this, but for today's topic, I would like to talk about few use cases. That why are they smart devices? Why? And they're just not noisemakers, if you will, that are on the downstream side just to make some noise. So let's go through lockdown application. IoT-enabled informer IP. So this application, all very popular in education vertical, primarily because of all the recent tragic incidents with the active shooter. So if you look at on the left side, that black box, that is an informer. It could go on a school administrator's desk. It could go in all the offices or all classrooms. It could be 100 or more than that. And it also could be controlled via a key fob, which is a remote control. So as you can see, it could not only receive notification, it could initiate an alert. Once that's done for a lockdown or any application, it could send out a desktop alert to 911 dispatch. Again, it could also send out text and email to first responders. It could also send out voice notification on the radio system. And lastly, it could also tie with their existing PA system. So as you can see, it's all tied to a unified platform. And this is the crux of an IoT deployment, where all these network of physical objects are connected to help make a meaningful decision. Let's look at another application, what we call radio messaging with an IoT-enabled Radio Interoperability Unit, which you can see it on the right side. That's an RIU+. Let's meet Dan. He's working on an oil rig. Cell phones are not permitted, and even if they are, most of the time there's no coverage. He extensively uses land mobile radio for day-to-day communications, for productivity applications, and for emergency notification. So how does he get notified? Of course, there are strobe lights and localized alarm systems, but again, those systems are just grabbing attention. But for continuity, voice message could be delivered to multiple radios via this smart device RIU through the unified console. So imagine with applications, and this is just one application that is very popular, but it could go anywhere, any environment that is any hazardous environment where they cannot afford any downtime. There is a significant cost if the system is down, they cannot operate a rig or any extensive applications. So let's go to the next one. Interoperability. Again, the same smart device. And we all know that high success rates in crisis response have traditionally been associated with team responses, not just the individual responses. And first responders primarily communicate via their two-way radio system. It's a LMR, land mobile radio system, which provides reliability up to 6.9. Because oftentimes, as we have witnessed, and as Imad mentioned, that during any tragic incidents, commercial network doesn't guarantee delivery, and that's where first responders rely on this robust communication platform. But as you can see, this first responder, his or her challenges not able to smoothly communicate across boundaries of agency. That further delays response. They cannot interoperate with other responder agencies who want to come help on an incident. Whether it's a tragic incident like 911 or any and even natural disasters, or it could be used for a, let's say, a sports event or a VIP event where there is a lot of collaboration that needs to happen on the fly. So these smart devices could allow to, for lack of a better word, patch different radio systems, be it a UHF, ultra high frequency, be it VHF, or 800 megahertz. Those are different flavors of technologies, or RF, that are used by first responders and law enforcement communities. So that's where you are, to the same unified console, you can activate all these radios, and also could help communicate a live voice communication among, as you can see in the right side, among these first responders on their land mobile radio. Now, this is my favorite. Converting legacy infrastructure to IoT. How we do it with a smart device, what's it? It's called Sensor Interface Unit. So there is a big push, especially in public sector, for smart city initiative. And when we talk about smart city, what's the foundation of it? It is based on a principle of information exchange between different sectors in the city. But the classic dilemma, infrastructure. Do I have all the infrastructure that is up to mark? Is it feasible to upgrade my 20-year-old water tower? Is it feasible to upgrade a bridge? Is it feasible to upgrade a access control system? So all these infrastructure has a different life cycle. So how can we grab information from that and make meaningful decisions? That's where this SIU, which we call it, it's a sensor interface unit. It has 16 contact closures, output relays, and it could make any legacy device a smart device by communicating through the cloud through that unified console. And this is one example that I gave about smart city. But it could go in, let's say, hospital. I'll give you an example of, let's say, that remote door monitor, an access control system. If there is any abduction, a newborn or infant abduction, there are localized alarms and triggers, but most of the times the horse is out of the barn. How can we notify the local community and even the hospital security without notifying the person who's running with that newborn? So there are endless applications. So this can be done today. What about tomorrow? As Imad mentioned about IoT and protecting people, Federal Signal, we also have deployed and designed many physical security systems that you see here. And when we talk physical security systems, primarily it is automatic license plate recognition, video surveillance for situational awareness, access control systems, and many, many, many more. So putting all the technologies that we discussed today aside, let's divide all these technologies in two big buckets. One, detection, detecting something good, bad, indifferent happening, and one is notification. So all these physical security, which if you can correlate, it falls into the detection side. Let's take an example, automatic license plate recognition camera. It's picking up thousands and thousands of license plates in 1 hour. How can it, and it's doing a great job in sorting out which one is on the hot list, which is the license plate the first responder or any audience is looking for. But notification is not their forte. They do notification on a standalone email basis. And in these cases, 30 seconds quicker response makes a lot of difference, life and death difference. And that's where we envision that these security systems will be converged on the same platform by having an API call or having a tight integration with the platform that you see in that cloud. Same thing goes on the video surveillance, and that's not a foreign concept. We see cameras all across the world. Now, right now, most of the time, and besides the TV serials that we see, the facial recognition is not there. So someone is manually looking at that information. One day it will happen that the systems are smart enough where there are no false positives and they're detecting the bad guys. But now what about notification? How can that be a smart notification and incident management, or you call it scenario management, that can be done in a meaningful way to make a lot of difference? So that's where we see it. And again, applications are endless. Let's say a public sector or a public works having a street sweeper. That's doing its job on cleaning the streets. But at the same time, if it's equipped with an ALPR camera or any sensors connected to the cloud, it's looking for the right information, and the right people can take right decision on the right time. And next one, Imad.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Nirmal. So what we've heard here is just a series of different scenarios and different devices. Certainly whether it's automatic license plate readers to video detection to the ability to initiate the communication simply by pressing on a button. But this is where we started, right? What does critical communication have to do with this brave new world of IoT? In many cases, things that we've been doing for a while, simply connecting all of them. And of course, the solution here is that regardless of how an alert is initiated, you no longer have to simply say, oh, I'm going to fire up a browser to get to Everbridge or a mobile application. The initiation can be now done from a physical device, like a big red panic button, by another machine through an API, or certainly still done manually through a variety of different ways. But the idea, of course, is that you have then this communications hub that then knows what to do based on not only who or what initiated the communication, but also based on a variety of other parameters. And then to make a decision as to what to do with it, including activating other devices or machines in addition to starting or initiating a full-blown communications plan. By the way, please don't hesitate to ask your questions in the chat window. We'll be getting to your questions after this. We have just one more slide to go. One of the key aspects of how all of this works is to understand the separation of concerns, the roles that each one of these components in this ecosystem will typically have. You know, what is the communication style? What type of message are we dealing with? What are the message requirements? Ultimately, in most of these scenarios, when you're dealing with a mix of machines and devices and people, you have to separate what's called the system logic. So whether it's clinical data, right, is the heartbeat really bad, or whether it's a particular event. We have somebody crossing a fence illegally, or we have a license plate that we're just reading. And then we have the appropriate communication logic that comes in. So the system logic tells us, alert, there is an issue coming in. The communication logic tells us, okay, based on the information that we're getting from the sensor, from the device, for example, who are we going to talk to or communicate with? Who are we sending the notification to? Where? Are we targeting a particular geographic region? What are we going to say to them? I mean, do we want specific information relayed from the sensor or the device directly? Do we want to translate it? I mean, does 1.21 gigawatts, I guess, mean anything to anybody, really? Or do we want to put it into plain English? And how are we going to communicate with people, ultimately? Do we want to communicate with them by ultimately reaching out to them at home? Well, what if it's between midnight and 5 a.m.? Do we really want to do that? Should we instead go and look at our calendars and see who's on duty right now? What if they don't actually answer? Is the information that the sensor sent us telling us that the situation is critical enough that I should go and wake people up? Or should I go to the person who's on duty? Should I then escalate this to a supervisor? Who do I connect with and when? So all of this deep communications logic stays on the communication side and the Everbridge side, whereas the system logic that ultimately triggers something can be on the sensor side, regardless of what kind of device or machine we're dealing with. And this is what makes the overall ecosystem that makes it powerful in a combination of IoT and critical communication. And again, this is why we'd like to, again, reiterate the power of the Federal Signal and Everbridge coming together. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Bill for some additional information. And as I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function to submit any question you may have.
All right, thank you, Imad. At this point, we are going to move on to our question and answer portion of the session. As a reminder, you may submit your questions by typing a question into the open text field in the questions panel on your screen and submitting it to all panelists. We will answer as many questions as time allows. So the first question we have is, what kind of reporting is available to the initiator of the emergency crisis communication message?
I can take that. The reporting that's typically available can be fairly extensive. So first, there is a dashboard that is a real-time dashboard that tells you exactly what's going on. So how many people has the communication gone out to, how many devices has the communication gone out to, and then what's going on. Things aren't necessarily synchronous. They're real-time, but not synchronous. So people may not answer their phone. We may need to then try a different path. So they may have preferences that says, you know what, reach me by text first, and then by phone, and then by email. So we will show the initiator in real time, whether they're using their mobile device or they're using a full-blown browser, exactly what's going on in real time, how many people have been reached, how many have confirmed, acknowledged, or if it's a polling question like a multiple choice question, how many have answered one way or the other. Same thing with devices. Which are the devices, depending on how you classify them, that have been activated in a particular area, for example. Again, because the system is capable of getting, in a way, confirmations or status back from the devices that have that capability enabled across the board. So you can see the aggregate in terms of a nice little pie chart that tells you the percentage of contacts overall that have either acknowledged or responded in a particular way or answered a question with one or three or four or five possible answers, and at the same time shows you the devices that have been activated at a high level. And then you can drill down into every single person or device to get the status of them and sort it any which way that you want in real time. Show me just the confirmations. Show me all the people who and devices that have not confirmed. So you can then, in real time, send an appropriate follow-up. Let me follow up with just the people who have not confirmed or responded or have responded with I need help, or show me just the devices that have not been activated in this particular area, all in one consolidated report that is more of on a real-time dashboard. Then you have the after-action reports that can show you an overall timeline, especially when you're dealing with very large populations. So show me in the first 2 minutes how many people I reached. And in a 5-minute by 5-minute block, I want to see how many notifications went out and what the responses were, and ultimately what the status were. How many times did I hit a congestion in a central office, or how many phone numbers did I reach that were disconnected? You can see the more detailed report that you can slice and dice at the conclusion of a broadcast going out. But ultimately, in real time, you can see it all as part of a dashboard that's consolidated.
All right, thank you, Imad. The next question we have from Roseanne. When is the integration between Everbridge and Federal Signal in effect?
Okay, and Nirmal, do you want to take that?
Sure. So the Level 1 integration is ready. So if an existing customer, for example, having Federal Signal Siren and they happen to have Everbridge mass notification platform, that is ready. What next step? It needs to happen. They just had to work with their respective account managers and ensure compatibility and add on the connector, and that would be done.
And obviously, we're all very excited. If any joint Everbridge and Federal Signal customers are out there and want to hear more about it, please let us know. I'm certainly even more excited about the second, third, and fourth phases that we're all working on to bring the entire vision to reality. But for now, it's there, as Nirmal said. So give us a call and we'll make it work.
All right, the next question we have comes from Ryan. I've had a few people tell me that they're concerned about using the internet for a life safety system. What are your thoughts on this, and how should I respond to convince them that it's not as bad as they think?
That's an excellent question. We hear that quite a bit. Again, remember that part of what we said is the idea is everything has to have some level of redundancy. Certainly on the Everbridge side, that's a mantra for us. I mean, and I can go on and on about the different levels of redundancy that we have. So the redundancy, as you could probably tell earlier, is in even our philosophy. If you're trying to reach out to people, you don't rely on any one particular path. You have to assume that at some point in time, phone lines will be down, cell phone towers will be down. The internet might have issues. Faxes may not be able to go through. Pager signals might be blocked. Who knows, right? But the more ways you have of contacting somebody, the higher the chances of being able to reach them, right? So the chances of everything being down at the same time can get lower and lower and lower. And again, that's where the Federal Signal integration comes in. You can still reach them via a big voice or a sign or whatnot. So that's on one side of it, right, across the board, which is reaching out to people regardless of where they are or to devices. Now, on the initiation side, again, this is where we believe in belts and suspenders. So I won't bore you with how redundant and scalable the Everbridge system is and how many different data centers we have and so on and so forth. You can simply assume that it's there, and I'll be happy to have that more in-depth discussion with you. But even in the way that you activate a notification, we do rely that from time to time you may not have internet connectivity, right? So for us, yeah, you can actually come in via a web browser to initiate something. Or as we said before, press that big red button if you have a Federal Signal device that can do that. But you can also come in via your mobile device with an optimized both mobile browser-based interface, so that it can only connect into a cell phone tower internet connection that may not be the best, that it's still optimized for that. Or a full-blown native application. Again, it still requires an IP or internet connection, but it could be via your cell phone tower instead of your wired one. And if all of that fails, well, guess what? What you can do is actually pick up the phone. We have something called live ops or live operator, a specially trained team that can, whose sole job, it's not customer support or anything like that, but is to initiate notifications. So they go through a predetermined process to authenticate you and know that you are who you say you are, understand what privileges you have, and they don't log in as you. They assume your privileges after authenticating you. So you'll always know in a report that it was initiated by an Everbridge live operator as opposed to by you. But it'll show up as having been done on your behalf with only your privileges as to who you can connect with, etc. So the system internally is built not only to have that level of redundancy in terms of how it's architected and designed and deployed, but also in terms of how it's accessed across the board. And I can tell you that it'll be more reliable and scalable and redundant than anything that a particular organization can have on premises or in-house.
And just to add to what Imad mentioned, the integration between Federal Signal and the Everbridge platform is important because the redundancy can be cut multiple ways. It has to be a layered approach where you have redundancy all the way from physical device to communication to internet, everywhere. So let's say, hypothetically, there's no way to get connected on internet. Then you still have control of your sirens, which is another layer that typically is leveraging your two-way radio system. So that's still there.
So we have another question from Bill. Does the unified console software require complicated programming to suit the client's particular needs?
Well, I'm not sure. It sounds like that's coming from somebody who may not have. I wish probably next time we'll probably have a few snapshots of the user interface itself, just to give people a sense for what all this looks like. The answer is no. Typically, as part of best new notification is it requires that you open up a user interface, and then from scratch, what you're going to do is say, here's the message, here's who it's going out to, and here's how it's going out, and click send. And that's it. Anything that has to do with your sirens or other devices will be pre-configured, and you never have to deal with it when you're actually sending out a notification. We would certainly never suggest that either during the setup or during the use of the system that anything close to programming would be needed. So if you can fill out a message, if you can type in a message and select the appropriate people who need to receive it and the appropriate devices in a particular area, and click send, that's it. And again, under duress or crisis situations, we'll typically suggest that even that may be too much, and you'll have templates that are set up where you can just have a series of drop-downs that tell you, describe the situation to me, and the system has rules that then kick in. So the system will build the message automatically, select the people and devices that have to be activated automatically, and all the different methods that the activation requires, and then it'll simply do it for you.
All right. We have another question from Ryan. How about, his question is, how about security? Many customers are always concerned about this when talking about using their network as a means to communicate with many people or using it to activate or sending messages to the sirens.
Let me take, Nirmal, maybe we should split this one. You can certainly talk about it from the siren perspective, and I'll talk about it from the overall activation perspective. So again, from an overall security perspective, Everbridge as a software service provider, we have to go through just about every security audit that you can possibly think of on a continuous basis, given who we do business with, whether it's the federal government or some of the largest financial services organizations in the world that probably have more regulations put on them and on their vendors, i.e. us, than just about any other entity on the planet. So the making sure that the contact data, the siren information is kept secure, that all the communication is encrypted, whether it's at rest or in transit, all of that is an inherent part of the system, and we're not just saying that, it has to be not only proven once by third parties, but on a continuous basis for us to keep what are called our ATOs, or our authorization to operate, either by the federal government or these financial institutions. So happy to go into the security part of it with anybody in more detail. We publish our SOC 3 reports, we're SOC compliance, FISMA, and a whole slew of other acronyms, depending on which industry you are with. We'll be happy to share that with you. Nirmal, do you want to just a comment on the siren side of things?
Sure, absolutely. So let's look at the two legs, right? One from Federal Signal Command and Control to the Everbridge Cloud. That's done through SSL. That's a secured connection. But then from our command and control to downstream devices, sirens, that is an AES 256-bit encryption at the application layer, and then a two-way radio communication that has their own encryption too. So it is encrypted at two different layers.
All right, thank you, Nirmal. It looks like we have one final question. It's, can we get a copy of the recorded version of this presentation with question and answers? The answer to that is yes. Leave an email after this presentation. It'll include the slides. It'll also include the recorded version of the webinar. So with that answered question, I think we're going to wrap up. I want to thank Nirmal and Ahmad for a great session, and to all of our attendees who were able to join us today. If you missed any part of the webinar, be sure to look for the slides on everbridge.com/blog. You also receive an email with a link to the recording and slides in the coming days. For follow-up questions about Federal Signal, visit www.alertnotification.net or contact Keith Conklin, who is a sales manager, at 708-587-3318 or kconklin@federalsignal.com. If you have any further questions about Everbridge, please visit everbridge.com or call 1-818-230-9700. And if you're an existing customer, please do not hesitate to reach out to your account manager. Thank you all again for your participation in today's webinar. We hope to see you online again soon. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.